Welcome to the ACI Learning Leadership Series. I'm your host, Daniel Lowrie, and today we're going to be discussing the topic of MSPs and cybersecurity insurance. Joining me today will be none other than Wes Spencer. Wes is an expert in this field. He's also the founder and CEO of Empath Cyber. Not to be outdone, he topped himself with also being a board member of Fifth Wall Solutions. Welcome, Wes. Glad to have you today. How's things going?
Life is good. So good to be with you.
In what way does cybersecurity insurance and MSPs need to come together and understand each other?
Yeah, it affects you deeply if you're an MSP. I'm not sure, just to address the elephant in the room, I'm not sure we've seen anything in the past 3 years that's come on board as fast as cyber insurance has. It's really become a monumental shift for MSPs. And I think a lot of them were caught unaware. It's one of these things where MSPs are having to solve for this for themselves with tech E&O, but also all their clients are now asking to have this solved for them because they have supply chain requirements where someone's mandating that they get cyber insurance, or they comply. There's some kind of compliance mandate. And so what happens with them is they're like, hey, IT nerd, I got this 10-page questionnaire and I don't understand all these words, so go fill this out for me. And then the MSP is like, well, time out. You're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. All these things that you're not doing, am I going to take the liability for that? Are you going to be angry with me when you're not doing these things? And now you just magically expect this to be happening. And so this is the predicament that MSPs are in. They kind of have a two-face frontal assault, one for the challenges themselves in obtaining it, but then also navigating the client waters with the expectations and demands that their clients have with cyber insurance as well.
That does sound like difficult waters to traverse, no doubt. And which starts to beg the question is, what is their best path forward when it comes to trying to figure out what exactly is being covered and where am I liable and what affects me versus my client? What kind of tools are at their ready that they can use to try to figure that out?
Yeah, it's there's a lot you can do. So I'll kind of I'll distill this all into a few key actionable steps. First thing is, and I'm going to sound like a lawyer, you got to talk to your lawyer. You really have to understand that there's a lot at stake here, and that you need to understand, is my MSP prepared for when that big cyber event happens? We know it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So are you ready for this? And then the second conversation needs to be to a licensed insurance professional. So I'm going to unpack a lot of this for you, but I just need everyone listening to hear me say, you got to open the conversations. And so I think where it goes is there's actually a lot to gain, not a lot to lose from this. As MSPs, please don't be worried about this. Please don't look at it as a threat. Look at it as a massive, colossal opportunity for your MSP. And what I mean by that is, after you solve this for yourself, and after you understand what the minimum requirements are, how the cyber insurers are thinking, you're going to be able to not only help your clients deal with this, but you're going to be able to make some money along the side too. Because what's one thing that we all know? When you present to them something new in cybersecurity, and it's typically expensive, what do? They cross their arms. They're saying, well, I'm not paying for that. I've never needed it before. Why should I need it now? That seems expensive. Is anyone really coming after me? No one cares about my data, on and on and on and on. But the discussion of cyber insurance comes up, and all of a sudden it shifts. And here's how it shifts. Let me give you an example. Toyota. So Toyota now requires their car dealerships to carry $5 million in cyber insurance coverage. So here's how it goes. Instead, they say, hey, I need to get this cyber insurance thing. I don't like it. I don't want it. But if I want to continue to have Toyota on the name of my building and sell millions of dollars of cars, I got to have this cyber insurance thing. So will you tell me what I need to do to be eligible? Because I don't really know where I'm at. Absolutely, Miss Client. We can help you with that. Let's do an assessment. Let's figure out kind of where you're at in this journey. And then we have a number of things that we can put in place that are going to be key requirements for cybersecurity insurance carriers. And we'll walk with you every step of the way. We're not your cyber insurance professionals, but we can help you do the things necessary to get there. You see how that conversation just drastically changes? And that's what MSPs stand to gain when they understand how to navigate these waters. And so to pull this back, talk to your attorney, talk to to a licensed, qualified, knowledgeable cyber insurance provider, and then understand the requirements and start building those into your MSP before you start building those in for your clients. That's the pathway.
Wow, that's great, right? These people are the professionals. You go to them, you say, "Hey, here's what I am. Tell me what I need, and then tell me how much this is going to cost." And of course, you do your shopping around. And you figure out which solution is best for you. Speak to your local, right? And of course, your attorneys are going to help you out with that as well. To say, hey, in this sphere, we really got to have this kind of coverage. And it kind of does lead us into the conversation of the idea behind coverage. Is normally what we're going to be getting is something akin of a blanket coverage that's going to cover most things, if not all things, or do I do kind of an a la carte thing? Is it both and? Are there any exclusions that I need to be aware of, or things that just aren't going to get covered that if I didn't know that, I might find myself in a real bad predicament?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot baked into this question. That's a good one. So yeah, let's cover a few things, and then I'll just mention this. One of the things, and not as a pitch, we actually do this for free. We have a free cyber insurance course that Fifth Wall Solutions does for MSPs. No questions asked, no requirements, no minimums, no nothing. So if anyone wants to hear more about what I'm about to open up for you, reach out and we'll dive in deeper. Okay, so couple things. First of all, when it comes to those coverages, every MSP and every client, it's different, right? We should never, as MSPs, because we're not licensed insurance professionals, it is super duper illegal for me to say things like, hey, you need this much in coverage. Hey, this carrier is better than that carrier. As an MSP, you need to stay agnostic. You need to stay in the side of the fence that says, hey, it's not my job to tell you how much coverage you need. That's between you and your licensed insurance agent, and then also probably your attorney. But we're going to help you get there. So if you decide it's 1 million, if you decide it's 3 million, if you decide it's 5 million, we're going to do the things in process to get you to the top of that mountain. That's going to be our job as your MSP. So that's where you start the conversation. I would just say, generally speaking, you don't want less than $1 million in coverage, because when you bake in the cost of a cyber breach, there's so many things in there that the client doesn't understand. And we have to be educators around that. We have to teach our clients that a cyber breach is not $10,000 and off I go. A cyber breach is things like your business is ground to a halt. You now have lawsuits with your suppliers and your clients who cannot get business done. You potentially have regulatory fines because the bad guys have stolen your data, and they're even reporting it out to your attorney general's office in your state. You're dealing with all kinds of recovery costs and legal costs and digital forensics costs. And at this point, they're like, wait, are you kidding? It's all this baked in? Yeah, the answer is yes. It's not just, did I pay a ransom? There's all these things that go into it. And so you need to have the conversation of how much you need, but know that a good, like what we call a holistic cyber insurance policy, regardless of the carrier, is going to cover all of those things that I mentioned. It's going to cover the things you never thought of, like legal costs and business interruption costs and forensics and all these other things. And so it is really, really important. Now, the last thing you mentioned, though, was exclusions. And I think exclusions are important to talk about because there are always, the carrier is going to always say there's certain areas that we've got to protect ourselves from. And I just to summarize a few different things, one of the big topics that people are worried about right now is what's called an act of war exclusion. I don't think we need to worry about that currently. That's basically the insurance carrier saying, look, if this cyber attack happens as a part of a cyber war, we're not going to pay for it. Now, that's no different than a physical homeowner's insurance policy. Russia drops from a MiG a bomb on your house, your homeowners isn't going to cover that. That's an act of war. That has not happened yet in cyber. So there's a lot of discussion around it, but let's not worry about that. I think the bigger exclusions that you really need to worry about are you doing things where like you weren't honest in the assessment. They said, does multi-factor, is this rolled out for everybody? Do you actually have this EDR, this endpoint detection response thing rolled out for everybody? If you do, then you say yes. If you don't, please don't lie. Those are going to be areas where the carrier is going to take that really, really, really seriously. And so clients need to understand there's no fudging of the numbers here. There's no, hey, you can just put yes on this. They're not going to know, right? No, they are going to know because in the aftermath of the event, they have all the forensic data. They're going to see everything that happened, how it happened, why it happened. And so from an exclusions perspective, those are the big things you want to focus on. And then again, a qualified professional, I keep saying these words, I know I sound like a broken record, but they'll help you navigate, make sure there's no weird, slimy exclusions that exist. So that's kind of how you have to handle the conversation.
And you kind of brought me to an interesting idea is Do the carriers do any kind of assessment beforehand when they quote you your price for your insurance? And if they don't, can you do anything, provide them things like penetration tests and vulnerability scanning and all sorts of documentation that would be some sort of proof that would get you a better rates? So when you go rate shopping, are there things you can do to kind of lower that price down for yourself?
Yeah, that again, an insightful question because you're reading into the tea leaves of where the carriers want to be. So first of all, I think it's important for folks to understand that the insurance industry is almost half a millennia old. It's ancient. And they've always operated off of what's called good faith. The entire insurance world is always, you tell me this, and I'm just going to trust that you're telling the truth. And if you are, and then your claim is going to be valid. If we discover that you were lying on something, now we got an issue. And so that works in a lot of lines of coverage. What they're learning is that in cyber insurance in particular, the principle of good faith just doesn't work. And it's not always that the client outright lies, it's that the client didn't understand or there was murkiness involved. Let me give you an example. Let's say in the questionnaire, it says, have you rolled out multi-factor authentication for every single user from the CEO on down? And you say, yes, because you have. But then what happens when next month you're having an issue and you're like, we need to disable their multi-factor while we're getting something going? You disable it and then you forget to re-enable it. And that's how the breach happens. Well, in that event, the carrier is going to cover that claim. But they look at it and they say, darn it, we shouldn't have had to have covered that claim because we didn't have visibility into that MFA being turned off and back on. So that brings us full circle to the question you asked is the carriers have woken up to this. And they've realized that cyber is the one line of coverage that they'd love to get better insights in so that they can use that both before they underwrite and then what they call continuously throughout the life of your policy. The challenge is, if I can hate on the carriers a little bit, they're kind of dumb. They don't understand how to do that. They look at it as like dark magic that nobody can do. And so right now what some of them are doing is they're doing these what we call third-party external vulnerability scans. And so what they'll do is they'll say, before we bind coverage with you, we need to know your domain name and your IP address, and we're going to throw our scanner at it. And our scanner is going to come back with a bunch of data. And then the problem is for MSPs, it doesn't work well because the scanner comes back and maybe it's a shared word or web, WordPress hosting domain. It's got a bunch of other domains on it, not even related. And it comes back with a nasty report of all these vulnerabilities. And the carrier comes back and says, denied coverage. And the MSP is like, well, wait, time out. That's not even any of my infrastructure. I don't have anything to do with any of that. It's all separated. And you're going to deny me and my client? Now my client's really mad at me because they think I did something wrong and there's a bunch of vulnerabilities. Like that happens on the reg. That's a daily conversation we deal with. And so this is where the carriers are like, well, maybe this vulnerability scanning thing isn't working. The other problem, though, is when you ask the question, can we just like send them a penetration test, for example? Well, the carriers are dumb. They don't know what to do with it. Every penetration test looks different, and they're trying to operate in the margins of volume. And so they're like, if they were getting thousands of these pen tests coming in, they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Listen, what does that mean? Is that important? And this is different than the way that one's written. And so I say all that to say, we're at the beginnings, not the end, of how carriers are going to treat underwriting. But let me paint the future as I kind of finish on your question. The future is this. The carriers themselves are going to get to a point where they can do continuous underwriting, to where they can say, hey, we saw Sally Sue flipped off MFA. We need you to flip that back on in the next 3 days. Hey, we saw an EDR alert from Huntress, and we need that to be corrected and dealt with and closed out in the next 24 hours. We're going to get to that direction to where the carriers are going to be able to see into they're not Big Brother. It's not the Eye of Sauron over here, but it is enough of like them having visibility and saying, look, if we're going to cover you for 1 to 5 million, we just need to know the basics. We need to know that there's no gaps in coverage. There's no gaps in issues of your security controls. We just need the high level. That's the day that's coming. I think we're about 1 to 2 years out from that happening, but I actually think it's really good for us, not bad for us, because it's going to finally give insight into the MSPs that are doing this right and the MSPs that are not doing this right. And the ones that are doing it right are going to probably see better rates and they're going to see better clients as a result.
I love that you put that in the idea of, right, it's not Big Brother. I mean, you both have skin in this game. So it benefits you both to have them watching your back and you trying to make sure that they don't have to pay out an insurance, which keeps premiums low for everyone. And that's a good thing for everybody out there. We're out of time for this interview, but Wes, you have done a phenomenal job of answering these questions for these MSPs out there that are watching. And we do thank you so much for joining us. And we thank you MSP providers out there for watching this as well. Hopefully you got a lot of good answers to your questions when it comes to cybersecurity insurance. That said, hopefully we'll see you very, very soon in our next interview.